With the help of Hashem, we are learning Beitzah, Daf, Yud. We are in the middle of the sugya discussing how Rabbi Yochanan comparing Beis Shammai Beis Hillel of one Mishnah to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel of another Mishnah found it to be of a contradiction, and therefore was, so to say, forced to say that Muchlefes Hashita. So we are using the first Mishnah, the final machlekes in the first Mishnah, Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, whether you lechatchila you can shecht a chayev oif on Yom Tiv. And the way we have it, the Beis Shammai is the lenient one. Beis Hillel is the one that's machmer. And now we already went through three Mishnayos in where in those following three it appears that when it comes to Simchas Yom Tiv, Beis Hillel, based on the importance of Simchas Yom Tiv, will be the mekel, and Beis Shammai is the machmer, for which Rabbi Yochanan said Muchlefes Hashita. We are in the middle of that sugya, and we are on Daf Yud Amud Aleph. We are 13 lines from the top of the Amud, or the first wide line, and we are now going to go through the following two potential contradictions, regarding at least one of them, Rabbi Yochanan concluded that Muchlefes Hashita. Now we are learning Gemara Rashi, and as Rashi writes explicitly on Daf Tes Amud Beis, that when Rabbi Yochanan resolved the contradiction by saying that we have to invert their opinions, Muchlefes Hashita, it means that Rabbi Yochanan, says Rashi, leaves Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in the first Mishnah as we have it. Beis Shammai is the mekel, Beis Hillel is the machmer, and the Muchlefes Hashita is going to be in one of these five Mishnayos. Just to speak out at least once, that Tosfos, that Rabbeinu Tam, also on Daf Tes Amud Beis, mamash towards the end of the narrow lines, writes Lokach Perush Rabbeinu Tam, that what Rabbi Yochanan said Muchlefes Hashita, what he means is that Muchlefes Hashita on Daf Beis Amud Aleph, that the following Mishnayos stay the way they are. And it is on Daf Beis that the final machlekes that the Mishnah records, their take, Beis Hillel is the mekel and Beis Shammai is the machmer. That's very important. But anyways, we're going to continue to learn Kishitas Rashi. We're going to learn now, this is all on Daf Yud, but we are quoting various Mishnayos and that we're going to have later in this chapter itself. Number one, regarding may one place hides the oir, the hide of an animal, in a place where it will be trampled upon. You see, shechting an animal is a lot on Yom Tov because the meat is a lot fresher if you shecht it now and eat it today. You can shecht it on Yom Tov. Working, tanning the hides is ma'abed, it's an av melacha. Leaving the hides untouched might lead to these hides becoming spoiled if you only begin tanning it, working it the next day after Yom Tov. So a solution, and that's again subject to this machlekes that we will speak about, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, is that if you have a person, the one who shechted the animal, he is placing the hides in a public area. He is not doing any tanning. Now tanning begins by people trampling on the hides to take out its fats, to take out its juices. I'm not doing it. I'm only placing it in the Reshus Harabim where people will walk, so others will trample on it. The others are stop walking. The others have no intent at all to tan a hide. Placing such a hide, if prohibited, will only be prohibited midrabanan. Ma'abed midrabanan. Now, the counter value is, if a person will not be allowed even to do that, they might not shecht an animal, because hides are very expensive. Why would I shecht an animal and have meat? You know what, I won't have meat today. At least my hide won't get ruined. That will be the logic for us to allow tanning the hides. That will be the fourth machlokes, in where it appears that Beis Shammai, because of Simchas Yom Tiv, right, doesn't care. He's going to be machmer. And Beis Hillel is going to say, Simchas Yom Tov be mekel. That will be the contradiction, as we'll speak out again. And the final and the fifth machlokes, again from a Mishnah here later on Beitzah, on the first chapter, on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, will be regarding the following. Now it's fascinating to know that it's permitted today to buy merchandise on Yom Tov, as long as the buyer is familiar with the vendor, taking merchandise in a way where they will not speak about the price on Yom Tov. Of course, they won't transact with money. But if you have a store and I ran out of l'chaim on Simchas Torah, I can go to your store, I can take a box of mashka, and after Yom Tov we'll speak price. So just to know that just taking merchandise, even though the buyer is going to pay for it after Yom Tov, is mamish permitted on Yom Tov. Now, the way people would sell schayr in the times of Chazal is that they would have booths. Many of these booths were not even fixed in the ground. And that's important. They were like Matilde. And there were shutters that protected that Ganovim should not take their schayr out. They would remove these shutters, and they would actually use the shutters as trays upon which to show that which they are selling. So the machlokes, the final machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is whether you can remove those window shutters to use as trays for schayra on Yom Tiv. We'll see later if you could remove it, can you replace it? Here also this will touch into Simchas Yom Tiv. On one hand, taking things apart, putting things together, that's soiser, that's boina. We'll see in a moment. Obviously all of these things at worst can only be a derabanan issue. And the counter value is, if that will not be allowed, then the vendors won't want to sell. If they can't put it back up, people are going to steal later, and there's going to be a lack of food for Yom Tov. It's going to be a lack of Simchas Yom Tov. That will be the final stira that appears to contradict Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Now we're going to have the first Mishnah on Daf Yud is the Mishnah that we already quoted yesterday. This whole topic of whether one... I want to make a big correction. When I said yesterday that chicken coops, that which is in there is muktzah, I want to make a very important correction. Domesticated birds are not muktzah by default. Now obviously we learned this in Daf Beis, that if you have chickens and you own them in order for them to lay eggs, you don't plan to eat them, that's an issue. Those chickens are muktzah. But b'chlal, non-domesticated birds are not by default muktzah. Doves, yoinim, and other non-domesticated birds, they are by default muktzah. And in order to make them non-muktzah, you have to designate them to be eaten on Yom Tov prior to Yom Tov. And here's the machlokes, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Is verbal designation enough? Kishitas Beis Hillel. You have to specify. You can't say that all of the doves or birds that are in this pigeonhole, from this I'm going to have. That's zikr not enough. You have to specify, I'm going to eat you, but you don't have to handle them. And Beis Shammai, which is the machmer, is going to hold that you actually have to handle them to render them not muktzah. We're going to go into the topic of breira, retroactive clarification. We're going to have on Daf Yud Amud Beis a fascinating Mishnah regarding someone that designated two birds before Yom Tov, two doves or any other birds that are muktzah. On Yom Tov they find a different number. It's going to be fascinating. So you designated two, you have now a third. So now there's at least one bird, let's say, that was not pre-designated. To say that bittul, we already had this earlier in the Masechta. Muktzah is a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Muktzah is a problem only on Yom Tov. The rule is davar sheyesh lo matirin is not going to be batel. So if you have a larger number, for sure you got a problem. What happens if you have a lower number? You designated 3 doves, or 3 pigeons, or any other birds that are halachically considered non-domesticated birds that are muktzah without designation. 3, and you find 2. You can say, well, the 2 that are here are from the 3. Or, just like 1 left, maybe they all left, and these 2 are ma'alma.
Another problem of treif, if you find 2, maybe someone ate it.
No, we don't say treif over here. Unless you find a reason to say that some chaya grabbed onto it. And that will be very similar to a machlokes regarding kesav meiser sheni. If you have money, you know that you left in a box 100 zuz of meiser sheni money. When you open up the box, you find 200 zuz. Or you left 200 zuz, when you open up the box, you find 100 zuz. Now, you're starting to forget what you're doing. The issue is, could you say, listen, I designated 200. If I have 100, it's from the Meiser Sheni money. Or do we say, whoa, I know I left 200. The fact that there's only 100 means that I forgot, but I must have taken out the whole 200. The 100 that's here is chulin. That's very similar to the machlokes in our Mishnah, and then the Gemara will point out how lav dafka, it will be similar, and chevra a lot more. It's going to be a beautiful daf halten cup. So again, we are in the first wide line. We're learning Gemara Rashi that when Rabbi Yechanan says Muchlefes Hashita, he means Muchlefes Hashita of Daf Beis. And the issue will be, again, that we are framing, Rabbi Yechanan framed the Machlokes on Daf Beis as ultimately Simchas Yom Tov, right? The fear is maybe the earth will be hard, a clod, and you're gonna crumble it. Maybe. That will be a reason for the Chachamim to make a Gzeira not to shecht, which is Beis Hillel. Why is Beis Shammai lenient, l'chatchila you can shecht? Because Simchas Yom Tov. Stam, it's a funny thing. People think Simchas Yom Tov is only if you eat fleishik meat. From here you see, it's a nebach, but Simchas Yom Tov is echet with that chicken. Many people, for some reason, they have chicken, but it's cheaper. But it's also called Simchas Yom Tov. It's basar v'dagim. Basar includes, whether you like it or not, my friends, chikalach. Okay, so the Ella, so now with the final fourth and the fifth, Ella, ikasha hakasha. We're trying to discover, we know that Rabbi Yechanan pointed out a contradiction, and the only solution was muchlefes hashita. What's the stira? So ikasha hakasha, nacham ala Mishnah, here it's all Mishnayos on Beitzah, on the first chapter, and this will be from Daf Yud Aleph. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shachol nivdorei. You can shecht an animal on Yom Tov. Are you allowed to tan, to be ma'abed the hide? Absolutely not. That's an isur da'oraisa. The problem is, since you can't tan a hide, if you're living in a very hot area, being that the hides naturally are filled with fats and moisture, it might begin to spoil. If the hides begin to spoil, you lost the hides. So what might be a solution? Be ma'abed on a way that it's maximum adarabanan, and then say, because of Simchas Yom Tov, you're allowed to do it. What's the Simchas Yom Tov? If I won't be allowed to begin the tanning process, the fear of losing the value of the hide will tell me, don't shecht, don't eat meat. So the Chachamim will say, okay, we're not going to make any rabbinic rules, like this you won't hesitate, and you will eat meat on Yom Tov. How would you do it only rabbinically? I'm not going to tan it. I'm going to shecht the animal. I'm going to place the hides in an area where many people are walking. That's called noisnin es ha'or lefnei adarsan. Now, I am not tanning it. I'm not violating. The people that are walking there might not even know that there is a hide there. They certainly don't have the intent of tanning it. This will at max be a problem derabanan on the person who's placing it there. Says Beis Shammai, you may not do it. Yeah, it's asar miderabanan. Ein noisten en soilaf ne'adarsan. Not only that, my friends, since you may not tan a hide, you know what status a hide has? It's muktzah. You don't say, if the animal was designated to be geshachten before Shabbos, so the animal is not muktzah. By the way, it's true, the animal is not muktzah. You can shech the animal. But now that you cut the hide off the animal, the hide is muktzah. And therefore, Beis Shammai says, you know what, you may not even lift it. Elam kain yesh olav kazayis basar. If there is a kazayis of basar, since you could go and get the basar, so therefore you can move the hide to get the meat. But once you got the meat off, you can't even move it. Beis Hillel, they are matirin. Very good. The Havamina is, again, why is Beis Hillel matir? Because of Simchas Yom Tov. Because if you will not be allowed to figure out this rabbinic, so to say, tanning, you might not shecht. So, going back to the last case of the first Mishnah, contradiction is, Beis Shammai says, yes, shechtet lechatchila, in the case that we spoke out. You might end up being koitish. No, Simchas Yom Tov. Beis Hillel is machmir. Beis Hillel does not care about Simchas Yom Tov. That's the apparent contradiction. And for that, Rabbi Yechanan, muchlefes hashita. Good. And again, Tosfos says muchlefes hashita on Daf Beis. Rashi says muchlefes hashita in this Mishnah. And the Gemara again tells Rabbi Yechanan, why are you saying muchlefes hashita? Mimai dilma loihi. Loi means it's not a problem, it's not a stira. Why? Kan loi ka'amri b'shamai Hassan. Let's just remember from yesterday. And Hassan means on Daf Beis. You know why Beis Shammai says you may slaughter a chayev oif lechatchila? Not because there's a problem, but Simchas Yom Tov overcomes the problem. There's no problem. That's the case that the Mishnah spoke out. Since the shovel is already inserted in the ground, there's no charisha. Since it's inserted in the ground, there's no muktzah. Since the offer is offered tichuach, my friends, there is no kitisha. You are making binyan. So we had Rab Abba, right? Kilkul, or Malacha she'en tzricha legufa. Guys, don't forget that according to Tosfos, it's a shtickle problematic. Because Malacha she'en tzricha legufa, we learned to Tosfos. See, kilkel is mutter on Yom Tov. Malacha she'en tzricha legufa, even with Rab Shimon, is patalavel aser. Why is it going to be mutter? We learned it because of Simchas Yom Tov. It's not going to fit with this. It's here we are arguing that we don't need Simchas Yom Tov, there's no problem. Notes, which will be the case of placing hides on an area where many people are going to trample on them. There, I know there is no ma'abed d'oraisa, but there's a ma'abed d'rabanan. If there's a problem d'rabanan, Beishami will be machmer. Likewise, inami at kan loik amr b'silul hachem. Why is B'silul lenient? You know why he's lenient? Because because a hide without doing anything to it is fit to be used as a mat. People would sit on the ground and people would sit on the juicy hide. You know why? It beats sitting on the mud. If you take this hide and you put it on the ground to sit upon, it's not muktzah. It's not muktzah. In other words, you want to call this a harama? Could be. But he doesn't even use this as a rabbinic issue. When I put something down on the ground for me to sit on it, and I'm allowed to do so, if people end up walking on it, that's not on me. The people that walk on it don't even know that there's a problem. They don't know that it's untanned hides. Today you have a carpet. People don't walk on a carpet. People walk on a carpet the whole time. Processed, thank you. They don't know that it's not processed. They have no idea. So the Beis Hillel considers it a non-issue. That's why he's lenient. Avol Hassan, but in their Mishnah, Beis Hillel is afraid that if there'll be a cloud of earth, you might crumble the earth. You will violate Ketisha. That's why loy. So if the fifth and the final, Ella Ikasha Hakasha. Also invited in the Masechta, Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis, Beishama Yoiminim, like we spoke in the introduction. Step number one is to know that one is allowed to buy merchandise on Yom Tov, of course, only L'tzoyrech Yom Tov. But you're not violating anything. You have to know the details that we'll speak out later. You can't speak price. You buy by approximation. But you don't tell the person, I need a dozen eggs. I need a box of eggs. I need a box of mashka. And then after Yom Tov, you approximate how much money you owe and you pay after Yom Tov, of course. Okay. Now, the problem is a technical problem. Vendors normally would have vendors' booths. Today you have retail stores. We're speaking, as we'll see, about movable booths. That's very important. And they were shuttered, and people, the vendors, when they would open up shop, they would take out the shutter. You have to know the history of how today you have these, you lift them up, you open them up, it's like a garage door, then they would remove them, and they would use those shutters as the trays. What's the issue here? What's the potential issue? Demolition, that's a Shabbos, Yom Tov, Soiser, and then putting it back, binyan. Says Beis Shammai, ein misalken es atreisen b'Yom Tov. You cannot even remove it. Now, you know what that's going to mean? It means that when people need more food for Yom Tov, they won't be able to get it. So there's going to be a lack of Simchas Yom Tov, so be it. Don't violate Stira Midrabanan. We'll see soon why it's only Midrabanan, if it's anything. Not only do they allow you to take off the shutters, they even allow for you to put it back. Now I want to go into a detail over here, even based on the Havamina, that Beis Hillel is only matir because of Simchas Yom Tov, which will have to explain why removing it and putting it back as a rabbinic. I understand why removing a shutter is needed for Simchas Yom Tov, because if the shutter is closed, you can't get to the merchandise. But once you sold the merchandise, why would you be allowed to put it back? The sale was done. The person already has their food or drink. And this, my friends, as we will see, God willing, on Daf Yud Aleph, that's going to be nice early in the morning. We're going to have a concept of Shloisha Devarim, or Arba Devarim. Ula says three things. It's called Hitiru, Soifan, Mishum, Tchilasan. Really, the heter should only be to do something in the beginning. But if you will not be allowed to do something at the end, you won't do it in the beginning. People are familiar with this concept when it comes to the Hatzalah, driving back. Driving back. Not only driving back is permitted because you might need the ambulance in the Yiddish shtetl, not because of that. Because if you won't be allowed to drive back, you won't go. You'll hesitate to go. That's called that hitiru soifan. Mishum tchilasan, so holds Beis Hillel. So you can even build your butka back up. You can put back the shutter. And again, Alma, the way Rabbi Yechanan understands the underlying question here, that regarding, it's about Simchas Yantiv. And who is the Machmer? Beis Shammai is the Machmer. Beis Hillel is the Mekel. Verimini, finally, the first Mishnah, Sheichet Chayv Oif B'Yamtiv, V'chulei. And now here, finally, the Gemara itself doesn't say that it's a stira Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel. Even Rabbi Yechanan is moida that Beis Shammai leikasha. We already accepted that. Because on Dav Beis Nachamol, since there is Deker No'utz, there is no problem. Here, Leke Deker No'utz, yes, you're demolishing Soiser. Ala Beis Hillel Kasha, and because of that, Amar Rabbi Yechanan Mochlafas Hashita. And now, says the Gemara, let's go with the Nusach HaCheres on the side, Dilma Loihi, or in the parentheses, Idnami, Taka not a problem. Which is maybe not a problem. You know why he's lenient? Not because of Simchas Yom Tov, we learned this on Shabbos, because Beis Hillel subscribes to the opinion that ein binyan bekalim, the ein stira bekalim. Now, a tircha shaloi l'tzoyrech won't be allowed. The tzoyrech is Simchas Yom Tov. Putting it back is l'tzoyrech hitilu soifa mishum tchilasim. But you're not violating anything. You're taking apart a movable item. These booths are dafke movables. They're not connected to the ground. Ein binyan bekalim, ein stira bekalim. Beis Shammai will hold yesh binyan bekalim, at least midrabanan. There is a problem. Avol Hassan, according to Beis Hillel, by the shutters, there is no problem. Over there in Daf Beis, again, if there will be a cloud of earth, you want to do a mitzvah, you're going to end up doing koitish, tchina, tulda of koitish. You're going to crumble it. That's why Beis Hillel is machmer. Now, just to speak out like this, according to Tosfos, because of one of these contradictions, Rabbi Yechanan said Mochlefas Hashita. L'Rashi, which one did he change? These ones, the latter ones. But according to the Rabbeinu Tam, it's very interesting. Like we just quoted on Tesamid Beis, Mochlefas Hashita is on Daf Beis. But according to Tosfos, Rabbi Yechanan felt that the three arguments we had on the first Mishnah on Daf Beis, it's not that in all three of them Beis Shammai is Mekel, Beis Hillel is Machmer. In the third one, Beis Hillel is the Mekel, Beis Shammai is the Machmer. Now that answers the question that many ask, that the Seder of the three arguments, the first one was about a laid egg, second one was about a din in Hilchas Pesach, and the third one was about what we keep on learning about shechting. Now shechting is about all Yomim Tovim. Could you shecht, can you not shecht the Chayiv Oif? With the Decker notes. An egg laid on Yom Tov is about all Yomim Tovim. The middle argument about the how much shiur, sa'oir and chametz, it's only regarding the Yom Tov of Pesach. Why did the Rebbe put that in middle? Why wouldn't the Rebbe put, I know it's about Yom Tov, but why wouldn't he speak about the Yomim Tovim that are all Yomim Tovim and leave Pesach for the third? This answers the question according to Tosfos. Because since, according to Rabbi Yechanan, Beis Hillel isn't always machmer, and according to Rabbi Yechanan, it's Daf Beis where Beis Hillel is going to be Mochlefas Hashita. Beis Hillel is going to be machmer concerning shechting. You understand? So we bring together the two times where Beis Hillel is the machmer, which is egg laid and on Pesach. And then the third one, where Beis Hillel is the lenient one, then you bring that for the last. Fits better, the Seder of the Mishnah.
So what about Mochlefas Hashita?
So there's a machlokes whether Rabbi Yechanan held Mochlefas Hashita. Depends how you learn the pshatim in these arguments. You have to know the dinim here. And the Gemara rejected Rabbi Yechanan's because, as we just learned, they didn't consider these arguments necessarily connected to Simchas Yantiv. All right, Aaron, hello. Let's go Mishnah. So we already had this din earlier. And to make a correction, if I said yesterday that chickens are muktzah, non-domesticated birds are muktzah. Doves, pigeons are considered non-domesticated even if you have a shoivach. And even if the pigeons of the neighborhood, they dreizach by you, they're considered non-domesticated, they're considered muktzah. The solution will be that if you plan to eat the pigeon on Yom Tov, you have to pre-designate it. General designation is not good. Saying, from the pigeons of this pigeonhole, I'm taking. Gurnish vert. You have to go in there. The question is, do you have to only point to the specific one? Is specific designation enough? Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, the Machmer says you actually have to handle it. And like we mentioned, because when you handle it, you know that it's fat or that it's skinny, you won't change your mind. If you don't handle it, it could be that when you take it in your hand, maybe you're going to decide, this is too lean. It's kush, I want to get something shmeina. And then you're going to put it back down. Then retroactively, the designation is nullified, and then you moved it in vain. So let's read the Mishnah. You got to actually handle it. Niyana means you have to shuckle it. It means you have to take it in your hands. You have to know exactly what you are deciding to take. If you took it in your hand and you said, I'm going to eat tomorrow, you're not going to change your mind. You don't need to do that. It's enough. You have to stand and say, but you have to specify. That's important. One thing, and not, I'm gonna have a yoina tomorrow from my shayvach. That's not enough. But the moment you specified, you need not handle. Says the Gemara, Amar Rab Chanan bar Ami. I want you to know that the whole reason why you might change your mind, which is why Beis Shammai holds you have to handle it, is only bevericha rishoina, only in the first batch, in the first brood, which means, my friends, interesting that doves. We're speaking about yoinim, and by the way, pigeons is it's in that family. They normally give birth to 2 kinderlach every month. Normally, it's a male and a female, but not during winter. So let's say from Pesach on, every chodesh, the mother gives birth to 2 birds. It's common for people, even though they have the shoivach in order to eat these yoinas, they would leave the first batch for the mother to have company. So since it's not common for you to take the first bricha, the first batch, that is where Beis Shammai says, you normally don't take it, but it's Yontif, you have no option. Yontif is, let's say, Pesach. But if it's going to be very lean, you're going to say, forget about it. There's a bigger chance you won't take it. The Beis Shammai you might change your mind since you normally don't shecht the first 2 kinderlach that are born in that season. So a specific but only verbal designation is enough. Shnia doesn't only mean shnia. It means anything subsequent of the first, where normally you shecht all of those yoinim, divrei hakol, meaning even Beis Shammai will hold that it's enough to verbally designate specifically, but you don't have to handle it. Nice. Says the Gemara, I got that. Why do you even have to specify? Lema, why isn't it not enough to say mikan ani noitel lemachar? Why do you have to specify the birds? You said mikan ani noitel. So why isn't that considered that you designated them all? And v'chitema beisila les lubereira. So now the Gemara understands that what will be the crux of this issue? If you're taking all of them, then none of them are muktzah. I'm taking all of them. The moment you know you only need to have 3 birds, and normally there's 10 birds in there. So then, mikan ani noitel will mean, well, which one was muchan? So Breda would mean that even though prior to Yom Tov we don't know yet which one you designated, but whichever one I'm going to end up taking on Yom Tov will be viewed as if retroactively this was the one designated. What's if you subscribe to Breda, that's the premise of the Gemara's question, then you would not need to specify. The only reason L'chora Beis Hillel says you have to say Zevazeh is because you're going to tell me Beis Hillel does not subscribe to the Breda principle. Problem is, Beis Hillel does. Ve'hatanan. Now, Chevra, this is a Moededika Mishnah in Eruvin. Let's speak this out by heart. If you have a mace in a home, everything under the same roof, it becomes Tameh b'tumas oil. But what happens if there's a room and there's a door? And as we know that even on the other side of the door, right the opposite, it's still in the doorway, we can view that as still being under the same roof. Now, if the door would be open, if there's a mace in this room and there's a door open, the tumah goes not only in the doorway, it goes into the hallway, it goes into the next room. If the door is closed, the tumah does not go beyond the door. But if the mace is going to be removed from this doorway, even though the door is closed now, halacha l'Moshe Messinai, whatever is in the doorway, under the mashkoif on the other side, even though the door is closed, since the mace will be taken out of this door, is also tummy. Now, step number 2. What happens if the room has, let's say, 4 doors, there's a mace in the house, and we don't know yet from which door will you remove the mace? So what we say is, since it might be removed from any of the doorways, this rule that even though the door is closed, anything that's in the doorway on the other side is also tamei, we'll say that by all the 5 doors. Now the question will be, if you now decide that it's going out of door number 1. So mikan ulahaba, from now onwards, of course, anything that's going to be placed now on the other side of the door, but in the doorway of door number 2, door number 3 will not become tamei, because you know which door the mace will go out from. The question is, does it retroactively take away the tumah? That's the Bereda issue over here. So now we're going to prove that Beis Hillel does hold of Bereda. We learned in the Mishnah, Hameis, Babayis, there was a corpse in the house. And V'lo Pesachim Harbe. And let's say out by heart, it's not yet determined which doorway the mace will be taken out from. So first of all, the din is kulan tameim. This rule, which is really halacha l'Moshe Messinai, that even though the door is closed, so the tumah does not go into the hallway, the tumah does not go into the adjacent room, but the tumah does go to the doorway, and any person or keli that's under the doorway, even from the other side, is going to be included in the tumah. From which doorway? From all of them. You know why? Because we don't know yet which doorway the mace will be let out from. But niftach echad mehem, this is the best thing. Once you open the door, it's not only a machshava, I plan to. You open the door already. So now, hu tamei, and guys, hu is not just the doorway. Now, the whole room adjacent is tamei, but v'kulam tohayrim. You know what's not clear? Shloimeh, when it says v'kulam tohayrim, doesn't only mean mekano lahaba? Or do we say that once you open the door, so Bereda, we were always going to take it out of door number 1. So things that were by the other doorways, we'll see that in a moment. Hold on. Another case in the Mishnah. Niftach is much better because niftach is a maisa. I open the door. It's an action that demonstrates my intent. What happens if you only have intent? You didn't open a door. Chishev lo hoitzi be'echad mehem. By a doorway or b'chaloyin sheyesh by arba alba. Guys, we already learned this from Sukkah. Arba means 4 tfachim, which is also an option. Once you made that decision, says the Mishnah, matzeles al kol absachim kulam. Even an intention is enough. Now again, my friends, is it enough only mikano lahaba, or is it even retroactive? We'll see in a moment. When does it work? If no one died yet, before the death, right? You already had in mind, there's a goisis, I know that so-and-so is never going to pass away, and I'm going to remove him from door A. That's where intent is enough. But once the mace died, now you have intent, machshava cannot take away the rule, which was that before you determine which door, all of them are tamei. That's what Beis Shammai says. Beis Hillel loiminim, no, af mishiyamas hameis. Now the havamina is, my friends, af mishiyamas hameis, Rashi says the havamina is that not only does machshava help mikano lahaba, but machshava helps retroactive, and the same thing is with niftach hadelas. It's all the same thing. What Beis Hillel says, it goes back. Beis Shammai holds it only goes mikano lahaba, but only a maisa helps mikano lahaba. Machshava only helps mikano lahaba if you had that machshava before there is a mace. So the problem is, we see over here that Beis Hillel does subscribe to Bereda. The Valdik answers the Gemara, no, we already learned regarding this Mishnah in Eruvin, that what? That Omar Rabba, everyone is only discussing whether mikan ulahaba you can take away the tumah from the other exits. Limafreya, no one says that if something was there prior to the termination, it loses its tumah. In other words, the machlokes there is a maisa, an opening up of a door can be done after the mace died, even according to Beis Shammai. From then on, if anything else is placed in the other doorways, it won't be tamei. That's because you did an action that demonstrates you will be removing the mace from this door. If only chishev, even mikano lahaba, according to Beis Shammai, it's not enough if there is already a tumah babayis, even for mikano lahaba. Wow. Okay. And that the whole Mishnah there is only l'taydas hapsacha mikano lahaba, meaning mikano lahaba in l'mafrei, and therefore, guys, we're good. Beis Hillel does not subscribe to Bereira. Rava says, I have a better answer. I can even learn pshat in the Mishnah of the mace that lemafreya. In other words, Beis Hillel holds, my friends, that even only machshava, intent, has the power retroactively to remove the tumah from that which was under the other doorways. Over there, yes, Beis Hillel subscribes to Bereira. Now, Chavra, let's come back over, just to come back to the topic. What's the topic? Why do I have to specify the pigeons? Why can't I just go before Yom Tov? I'm hungry, I need fleishiks. I'm going to have dove. Oh, Simchas Yom Tov. I'm going to take it from that pigeonhole. I know there's 10 doves. I'm only going to take 1 or 2. Okay, whichever one I end up taking, that will be the retroactively. That will be the one. That's not muksa. And Beis Hillel subscribes to muksa. So second to last line, v'hocha hainu tama. Yeah, Bereira. That's not the point. The point is that you might take one. And once you have it in your hand, dilma mitaltel v'shavik. Mitaltel, guys, this is even according to Beis Hillel. If you don't need to pre-designate the specific, even verbal, you don't need to do that. But when I said, let's give every bird a name. I'm taking you Chaimke and Yankele. Once you predetermine the birds, according to Beis Hillel, even though you never handled it, you're going to take those birds. You know there's muktzah, those are the ones you're taking. Whether it's fatter than you thought, whether it's leaner. If you don't even predetermine it, if you know, I'm going to take 3 birds, I have from 10. So when will you make that decision? You'll make it on Yom Tov. It could be you'll pick up bird number 1, Vishavik. You'll put it back down because it's not as good as. You'll pick up the other bird, Vishavik. And therefore it's going to come out, V'kametaltel mida deloy chazile. That's a problem. You ended up moving something, once you put it back down, Bereira retroactive, that was not the designated one. So now you got a problem. Verstehst? Why are we not afraid if you specifically designate? So the Gemara explains. But doesn't Beis Hillel say clearly that why not? Why didn't you say the same thing? If Beis Hillel says you don't have to handle it, maybe you'll put it down, you won't put it down. No. If be'erev yontiv, that's the way we're learning Gemara. If be'erev yontiv, you know there's a problem of muksa. You know you have to designate them, and you specified, I'm taking you, bird, and I'm taking you. You don't have a breira. What's your option? What are you afraid? Beis Hillel says, you're going to put it back down, you'll change your mind. How can you change your mind? There's no other options, because the other ones are muksa for sure. So we're not afraid that you're going to put it back down. Daf Yud. Aval be Yom Tiv. But to make the designation on Yom Tiv, you can't do that. Because if you would only generalize before, you would feel that you have more liberty to choose on Yom Tiv. Then Zilman, the Mishtakhe, Shmeinim, the ones that you thought were fat are Khushim, the ones that you thought are Khushim are Shmeinim, and you end up, retroactively, and what did you do? You moved Muktzah. Gavaldik. And therefore, Inami, furthermore, Zilman, the Mishtakhe, Kulam, Khushim, if you did not specify the ones that you're going to take, you just made this general statement, you know what you're going to end up doing is psychologically. If you didn't specifically designate, you might pick them up. None of them are good, you won't eat meat. Once you specifically designate, you already know, I'm eating that bird. You're not going to look whether it's fat or skinny. They're all going to be lean. And you'll leave them all. Even without touching them. Even if you won't touch them. You know, if you don't go into the chicken coop, you don't see what's going on in there. You didn't see what's going on. When you make a choice blindly, you can change your mind. Once you know what you're choosing, even though you didn't handle it, you're going to end up taking it. All right, here we go. Mishnah.
Don't we hold by brera halacha, like you're at a drinking fountain and you make a bracha? It's on whatever water you get, not on.
So I just want to say like this, Aaron, that we paskin that for any rabbinic issue we subscribe to Bereira, And for all doiraisas, we don't subscribe to Breda. Okay, I was just mentioning about a whole different din that when you make a brach on something, you have to hold the item in your hand. And when you have a drinking fountain, you don't have that item in your hand. So you say the bracha was for what's gonna. Once you drank it, it was for that. Yeah. Okay. Says the Mishnah. Now this is. We just said that neither of them subscribe to Breda. And that's why it's so important to keep on mentioning, even though there's a whole talk over here that Rashi speaks about this whole tumah, the second wide line that shegazru chachamim ala tumah derech yitzia, and really the Maharav of Ranchenberg quotes a Rashi that says that we're speaking about this tumah, even though the door is closed. Even though the door is closed, since the tumah will go out from that door, everything on the other side is tamei. In the doorway, that's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai. That will all fit. In other words, since the issue of tumah is a doiraisa, halacha l'Moshe Messinai, therefore we don't say Breda. None of them say Breda. Everything fits. Okay, Mishnah. Now this is fascinating. Here we go. Right, you have to designate doves. All right, let's go with Beis Hillel. You don't have to take them in your hands, but you have to specify. What happens if before Yom Tov zimun shchoirim, the doves that you chose to eat, Tzemach is cooking over here, black. They're and u'matzah levanim. And then on Yom Tov you go in there, and you know what you see? White. Or levanim, u'matzah shchoirim. Now, the Gemara is going to ask Pshita. But the point will be is that the ones that are there are not the ones that you designated, and therefore, I don't know why Kevin needs pictures. Now we know. Okay. So, u'matzah shchoirim, what's the din? Muktzah. You can't take it. Now, here goes. Shnayim u'matzah shloisha. If you designated 2 white, and the next day on Yom Tov you find 3 white. So here, even on this case, all of them are asur. Why don't you say, the 2 that were here are not muktzah. There's only 1. Why don't we make a bittul b'roiv? Davar sheyesh lematirin. Because the problem is a problem that will go away after Yom Tov. Chol HaMoed, there won't be muktzah. Isru Chag won't be muktzah. So you can't have any of them. Now, if you designated 3, yoinim, shloisha matzah shnayim. Here says the Mishnah, azvaz that mutarim. Why? Because what we say, not that since 1 of yesterday flew away, together with the 1, they all flew away, and these 2 are new ones. If we were to say that, then it's muktzah. We don't say that. We say 1 wandered away, and the other 2 were from the ones that were here yesterday, and therefore mutarim. And the final case in the Mishnah is, if prior to Yom Tov you designated the birds that are inside the cane, or people pronounce it the kan, they are inside the coop. And now on Yom Tov you find them on the ledge, but lifnei hakan or lifnei hakain, here we say asurim. If they're not inside, again, what will be the other side? The counter would be, no, come on guys, the ones that were inside, they just hopped outside. They gave a little jump outside. We don't say that. Once it's not inside, we say the ones that were inside went away. The ones that are on the ledge, in front of, but outside the cane, ma'alma da'ase, and therefore they're muktzah. Te'im ein sham Elohim, but if there are no other birds in this vicinity, a lot more details in the Gemara, then we have to say that the birds that are on the ledge are those birds, because there's no more birds in the vicinity. You know, the Gemara is going to continually, I say pshita or taka, why not? And we'll break down every case in the Gemara. So let's begin. The Mishnah, the Gemara begins referring back to the first case. You designated black and you found white and you found black. The Mishnah says asurim. The first 2 cases, not the third case. The first 2, pshita, of course, they're different color. What happened really here was you have 2 pigeonholes. Every pigeonhole has, one of them have white. This is when there was still segregation, and the other one has black. You were mezamen all of them. You have a big appetite. Novers, then the white ones were in the right one and the black ones were in the left one. Comes Yom Tiv, the whites are in the left and the blacks are in the right. That's already a chiddush, because here you might have thought, why don't you just say that the ones from this side went to that side, the one from that side went to this side, and they're all designated, they're all muchand. Omar Rabba again, you designated all of them. Prior to Yom Tov, the whites were segregated alone, the blacks were segregated alone. All what happened is that they switched sides. It looks like they switched sides. If that's what happened, I got no problem. They are all the same that you designated. The only thing that happened was that they just switched pigeonholes. Kamash Milan, we don't say that. Or we are choyesh, we are afraid maybe that Hanach Osdu La'alma, the ones that you designated went to the world, Vahani, and all of them that you find now are Achrin and Inu, and therefore, since it's a non-domesticated birds, they are Muktzah by default, and therefore, even though Simchas Yantav, but no Muktzah, you may not shech the birds. Says the Gemara, why don't we say, do we say that this will be a classical example of the following two counter values that you have to pick one or the other? There's a value called roiv. I'll give you the case of roiv. If you find meat in the street, and on that street, let's say you have 10 stores, 9 of them sell basar shchuta, one of them says basar nevela, that's the case of you go after the roiv. There's a value of majority. Now there's another value called karev. Where do we have karev? In shkalim. In the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, we had 13 shofars, 13 tzedakah pushkas. And they were designated for different purposes. What happens if you find money on the floor? So the rule is, go after karev. The money is the closest to which shofar. That is where it came from. So there's an instrument of go after the majority. There is a concept to halachically go after that which is proximity, that which is closer. What happens if you have to pick one over the other, if they're both leading in opposite directions, either roiv or karev? So we had Rab Chanina said that the roiv v'karev, if you have to pick one over the other, which one dominates? Halech achar haroiv. Now the same thing you can argue over here. What did we just say? That you have two pigeonholes. Whites were in the right, let's say blacks were in the left. Now they're flipped over. So what's the question now? Did the one in the right come from the left? That's karev. The roiv, the majority of pigeons are out there in the world. What does the Mishnah paskin? That you say it's asr. If the value, if the instrument, if the tool of go after karev would be implemented, they would be all mutter. Yeah, ba'alma, the pigeons are muktzah, but maybe it came from the closest one. So the Mishnah only makes sense based on this principle that if you have to choose between these two counter values, you follow roiv. Nothing wrong with that, but the Gemara says it doesn't need to be that way, because just like Abaye said elsewhere, and we'll get there, God willing, in the next year, that the scenario of these series of Mishnayos is bidaf. Bidaf means, don't think of a pigeonhole with a little ledge. If you have a little ledge, you know who hangs on the ledge? Only the pigeons from the pigeonhole. A daf means a platform, a porch. If you have a big daf in front of a pigeonhole, many pigeons constantly come there. So you know what? Let's go after karev. Let's go after karev. If there is a daf, don't say that the closest ones are not muktzah, because you designated. Only out there are the pigeons that are not designated. No. On the daf, there's always pigeons. On the daf, there's always doves. Even karev, there is more muktzah than non-muktzah. The daf is closer than the other shoivach. Shlem is saying even better. Even better. In other words, the karev it's the daf itself. In the vicinity, you have many other pigeons. Okay, just like I said elsewhere, bedaf, maybe our Mishnah is only speaking about bedaf. In other words, if there would not be a daf, if there would not be a platform, then maybe if it's between roiv and karev, maybe you would go after karev. Okay, weiter. Shnayim matzah shloishim, then asurim. And here it's easy. Here explains it. Oh, it's getting late. Says the Gemara, because manavshach, iyachrininu, right? If all you left 2, right, and now you found 3. What are the 2 options? The two options are, all the three are ma'alma, then avada hu achrin ininu. And even if you're going to argue that the two that you designated are here, the only addition was one, that's a problem. Even if the two that are here, two of the three are the original two, so what? There's a third one. There is an additional one. The third one is a chavada muksa. And the ma'aravi who is mixed in. And the Gemara goes with, no need to say. There's no bittul because of davar sheyesh lematirin. So therefore, you gotta, each one you pick up, you gotta say, maybe this is the one that's muksa.
Get it. If they have option to leave, you can say if there is two, it's not the same two. They left and other two are here.
That's even worse. In other words,
So you're saying if there is two and you designate the same color, you can leave them.
that you can do. Okay, Shlem is just saying that if you designated two and you find two, you can assume that they stayed here. That makes sense. You have to know pigeons. We don't know pigeons. We don't know much of anything, but I'm saying that Chazal understood if you left two, you found two in the same color, you're good. Now, here is the key. The whole daf today, let's chaparain, is you designated three, this is so good, and you found two. So you can say, it's good. Lav dafka. Now our Mishnah says it's good, because what you say is, one flew away, but the two that remained are from the original ones. Shnai mutarim. My tama. Hanu inu ninu. First white line. The two that are here, inu ninu aramish. The chad meinai, only one of them, azala alma. Says the Gemara, well listen, if that's the case, perhaps our Mishnah only follows Rebbe and not the Rabbanan. And let me tell you something, that's not ideal. Because remember the klali hashas, the klali halacha, Rebbe chavei roi, halacha kerebi. But Rebbe v'chavei rav, yachad v'rabim. And stam Mishnah, if this is subject to our machloikis, and the Mishnah over here doesn't bring an argument, which would mean that we are paskening like Rebbe, that will be an anomaly, that will be a chiddush. What Rebbe, what Rabbanan? The Tanya, you spoke about in the intro. It's mamish, it sounds like the same. Oh, this is a gavaldik Gemara. What's the case? Hiniach mana. Mana is 100 zuz, is one mana. We're speaking about meiser, sheni, money that you left in a box. And then you open the box and you find 200. B'chlal, this is a miracle. Bayos the minig is, no matter how much money you leave, there's always going to be less. This is only in the Torah. You left 100, you find 200. So the question is, how do you view the 200? So Rebbe holds, chulin u meiser sheni me'oravim zebozeh. The one you found an additional one. Let me tell you what you don't say. You don't say that you would never put chulin in Meiser Sheni. You don't say that. And therefore, the 100 zuz of Meiser Sheni you forgot, you put elsewhere. Everything here is chulin. You don't say that. Rebbe says no, you put in the box another 100 zuz, and now you have to know the dinim. So what do you do now? So the 200 is 100 and 100. So what do you do? Rashi says that if the quality of the coins are not the same, so you make a separation, separate the better quality coins from the lesser quality coins, and make a declaration that from whichever 100 that was Meiser Sheni, all of it should go on the better coins. And you could be Machalal, Meiser Sheni, Kedusha, from money to money. However, the Chachamim say Hakol Chulin. Hakol Chulin is because people don't mingle Chulin and Meiser Sheni. It must be you forgot. It must be that you or someone else removed all of the Meiser Sheni, and now someone else put here. If you find money, you presume it's Chulin. Atkan has nothing to do with our Mishnah. Now, next case. Next case is the same. It says the Beitzah Weiter, guys, we're in the third wide lines. This is great. Hiniach Mosayim, you left 200, and now you find the money. It's mamish similar to our Mishnah. In other words, the amount found is a decreased amount. What's our Mishnah? You left 3, you found 2. What's the case over here? You left 200, and now you find 100. Rebbe says same thing. Mana munach, mana mutal. Just whatever left, whatever remains is Meiser Sheni, so holds Rebbe. It sounds like a Mishnah, right? That from the 2 of the 3, it's Muchan. Chachamim say no. Again, the fact that it's not the same amount must mean you removed what you left. And this is new. You don't remove from the Mosayim 100, you remove all of it. You keep it all together. Once you see it was removed, you say it was all removed. Now, there's details over here. Hold on, what do I mean? Maybe you only removed 100, at least make it into a maybe, and a chanami. Many people say that we're speaking about Ma'aser Sheni, that's only midrabanan, and Safik darabanan l'kula. Fine. So the point is, l'cho'ura, our Mishnah only follows Rebbe, says the Gemara, nisht, filo teim rabanan. The Rabbanan that will say, in the case of Ma'aser Sheni money, if you find a decreased amount, it indicates that all of the original left. Here, we're not going to say so. Why? Because ha'itmar Allah, both Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Lozi and Rabbi Elazar, the Amri Tarvayu, you can't compare pigeons with money. I'll tell you why. Goizalois, hoyol va'asui in ledadois. Pigeons, naturally, they hop away. It's shayach for you to leave 3, and a pigeon can walk away. But when it comes to geld, not my money that somehow walks away. Other people's money, that if you leave it, unless someone takes it, it stays where you left it. It's funny. Every Yid learning the Gemara with Kinderlach says, I don't know, halavai. You know, Rabbi Leader, what does he say? That money talks, my money says, bye-bye. That's his line, goodbye. So here we're talking about not talking money, but walking money. Money doesn't walk away. And therefore, why is 100 missing? Someone removed it. If someone removed it, then they removed all of it. They remove because they keep all the Ma'aser Shenim together. Pigeons walked away by themselves. Okay, that's a great answer. The Gemara has not a challenge of the answer is wrong. The Gemara's challenge is, why did we even need the answer? Says the Gemara, why did you even have to say something which makes a lot of sense? That Shani Goizalas Hoyl Vasun Ledadois. The whole problem is not our problem. The whole comparison is not necessarily correct. We learned regarding, guys, this is regarding the Beitzah. This is regarding the machlokas of Ma'aser Sheni money, Azvos, that Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Elazar said something else. Now we don't know who said what, but Chad Omar, B'shnei Kisin machlokas is very important. Another nuance, which is so important. Guys, the money is in a box. The question is, when we're speaking about the 200 zuz, you left 200 and you found 100. Was 100 zuz in one purse and the other in another purse in the same box? But were they in 2 kisin? And one of them say that that's only where you had the machlokes. Avol bekis echad, if they were all in one purse, everyone will agree that the fact that you left 200 and now you found 100, it's not the same. We'll see how that's so negeya here. And v'chad omar, the opposite. That they only argue because echad machlokes. Avol b'shnei kisin. But if 100 zuz was left in one purse, the other 100 in another purse, in the same box, but they went 2 different kisin, everyone holds that even though you went down from 200 to 100, what remains is Ma'aser Sheni. It's called mana munach, mana mutal. Now let's speak out. B'shloim elaman da omar b'shnei kisin machlokes. Guys, chickens are viewed as shnei kisin. You know why? Because everyone is independent of the other. They're independent. So therefore, it seems it's alike. And that's why the solution will be, even when it comes to 2 kisin, money doesn't walk, pigeons walk. But according to the Raman Omer, that says, so hashta mali lomeli l'shanois or lomeli l'shanuye Allah Omar. Why do you have to give any other answer? Ha'amrat, you said b'shnei kisin, and guys, our case of doves are just like shnei kisin, coins in different purses. The pigeon is not on a purse, but every pigeon is separate, is independent of the other. And you said like pligi. So the Gemara says, Omar Avashi, even according to that man the Omar, the case is that the pigeons were tied. He's making a bigger chiddush. The case of the one who says that the machlokes is b'shnei kisin, the purses were tied one with the other. Ooh, now we're back to the problem. So maybe our Mishnah is only like Rebbe. Still, we say the last line, since they're living beings, even though they were tied together, they pull apart of each other. So what if they were tied? Makes sense. One pigeon flew away and it pulled itself away. But kisin loy menat chiyadadi. Now, if that's the case, Take, why does Rebbe say mana munach mana mutal? Rebbe Yamalach kisin amezimnin de misakel kitrei. There are times that it gets undone. Gevaldiks. Bottom line is that we need to give the answer, but our Mishnah can even follow the Chachamim. Oy gevalt sliches. God willing, to be continued.